The 2026 NASCAR Hall of Fame class has been officially announced, and Connor Zilisch has been cleared to return this weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight on those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2025 Fun Pots Patriotic scheme that we'll see at the Coca-Cola 600. I really like this paint scheme. The colors look really well on this car. The one he had that's not patriotic was good. This one looks actually really good too. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Charlotte. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chase Elliott's 2025 Napa Patriotic scheme that we'll see at the Coca-Cola 600. I'm going to be honest, it's not one of my favorite patriotic schemes I've seen from Chase Elliott. It does look alright. I do like the camo look to it, but I've seen better Chase Elliott Napa Patriotic schemes before. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jesse Love's 2025 Whelen Patriotic scheme that we'll see in the Xfinity race at Charlotte. I actually like this one quite a bit. The colors work very well on this one. It does look pretty nice, and I think it's a nice looking car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is AJ Allmendinger's 2025 Leaf Filter Patriotic scheme that we'll see this weekend in the Coke 600. Like the other ones, I think this one is really good. I think Colorado Racing knocked this one out of the park. It does look great. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Stephen Parsons' 2025 Spring Race scheme that we'll see in the truck race at Charlotte. I think his scheme is actually not bad in my opinion. I like the green, I like the black. The colors actually match pretty solidly. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Justin Haley's 2025 Gamebridge Patriotic scheme that we'll see in the Coca-Cola 600. I think did a really good job on this one. The red, the white, and blue mixed together very well. It is a nice looking car from Spire. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ty Dillon's 2025 Fallen Outdoor scheme that we'll see at Charlotte. This one is a very interesting one. You've got a yellow number, you've got white and black yellow background. It does look solid, and I do like the colors of this car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ross Chastain's 2025 Jockey Patriotic scheme that we'll see in the Coca-Cola 600. Trackhouse once again knocked this one out of the park. They've always been really good with their paint schemes. Kyle Sachs always does a great job on these cars. This one does look really good. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Christopher Bell's 2025 Ream Patriotic scheme that we'll see in the Coca-Cola 600. This one's a little different than what I think he had last year, I'm pretty sure, because it's a black number with a blue background, stars and stripes on it. This one does look pretty good. I do think they did a really good job on this one. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2025 Freeway Patriotic scheme that we'll see in the Coca-Cola 600. Like the Ross Chastain scheme, this one looks really good. I think the colors work incredibly on this car. It looks great, and it does look very good. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Dillon's 2025 Bass Pro Winchester Patriotic scheme that we'll see in the Coca-Cola 600. Say what you want to say about Austin Dillon. Usually when it comes to his patriotic schemes, they are very good. I think that RCR did a solid job on this one. I think the colors pop. They work perfectly. It does look fantastic. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Shane Van Gisbergen's 2025 WeatherTech Patriotic scheme that we'll see in the Coca-Cola 600. There's really not much difference from the normal scheme. The only difference is it's got stars and stripes on it. But I gotta say, regardless if they've got that or not, this is still one of the better paint schemes we get every year as a WeatherTech car. It's beautiful. It works perfectly. This one looks really good, in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Eric Jones's 2025 Avanhel Patriotic scheme that we'll see in the Coca-Cola 600. This one looks really nice in my opinion. I think the Legacy's had some up and down ones in the past, but I gotta say this one is really good. It works perfectly, the colors look great, and it's going to be nice to see out on the track. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sam Mayer's 2025 Audible Patriotic scheme that we'll see in the Xfinity race at Charlotte. I think this one actually is very good. I think that they did a really good job on this one. I do like the normal one that he's got, but this one actually looks really nice. And I do think that the Haas factory team did a really solid job on this scheme, in my opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Pinnacle Financial. As it was confirmed yesterday that Pinnacle Financial will expand their partnership with 2311 Racing and will sponsor Tyler Reddick for 2 Cup Series races in 2025. They'll sponsor him next week at National Super Speedway, and then they'll sponsor him at the night race at Bristol Motor Speedway. The car has also been revealed, and I got to say the car does look really good. I believe Pinnacle Financial has had a little bit of a relationship with 2311 Racing, work with Tyler Reddick over the course of the last couple of years. But I think it's pretty awesome to see they are expanding that partnership to go farther than just a couple weeks in the season. I'm glad that they actually are going to be stepping up to the plate and sponsoring for a couple races in 2025. I think it's a big deal to have a sponsor come in. Of course, they've lost some big sponsors like Dr. Pepper in the last couple years and even Root Insurance in recent years. But I do think, nonetheless, it's a really big deal to see them go ahead and bring that in. It's a really nice to see. And again, I think it's just great that a new sponsor is coming in and working with them. I think it's pretty awesome news overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lime Rock Park. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern on Monday evening that Lime Rock Park is expecting around 12,000 to 15,000 fans for the event. And according to what the state wants, they want to turn the highway into one-way traffic. And a lot of people in the area are not very happy about that. They live very, very close to the racetrack. And people sometimes aren't the biggest fan of the noise around there. Now, here's one thing I'm going to say. When it comes to noises and being at a track, if you lived in the area your whole entire life, I'm not going to be criticizing you here. But if you moved out next to a racetrack, you should know what you're doing. It is not the fault of the racetrack. The racetrack has been there for a long, long time. You should know when you move to a certain area of the country, you should know if a racetrack is there. You need to do your research and make sure that the track is there before you decide to go ahead and move there. Otherwise, you're just complaining for no reason at this point, because I think it's stupid that people are complaining about the sound and noise, especially people who've never lived there before. So I think it's really stupid. I think it's incredibly foolish, and I think it's not a good look on people's part to be complaining about a racetrack that's been there for a very long time. I think that people know how the track's been there. I think just some people are complaining for the sake of complaining, and I think it's ridiculous. That'd be like complaining about the sound of an airport, and noise of airplanes when you move next to an airport. That just doesn't make sense to me, and I think people need to stop moving next to racetracks and then complaining about the sounds of race cars. I just think it's stupid, and it's bad logic on their part, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carson Wear. As it was confirmed on Monday or Tuesday that Carson Wear will drive the number 35 for Joey Gase Motorsports in this weekend's NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Carson Wear has made a couple select starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year. I believe he's driven the 07 car for SS Greenlight Racing, but hasn't had the best finishes in NASCAR Xfinity Series competition this year. Now, I do believe there's going to be one or two cars in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race that will be going home. I do think the 35 car, however, is not in a bad position. The owner's point's currently at the moment, so Carson Wear, unless a lot of the slower cars do end up making the field, I think Carson Wear should be okay to make it in regardless if they qualify in or not. Because we know the Joey Gase Motorsports team, they're not one of the fastest organizations out there. So we'll see how we can end up doing and see if he can run very, very well. But I don't expect much from him. I think Carson isn't even the most talented person out there, I gotta say. But I hope he can do a really solid job and run really well. But I'm not expecting Carson Wear to be a major factor this weekend in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Charlotte. I think he's going to struggle and not show a lot of speed this weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Bicki. As it was announced on Monday afternoon that Josh Bicki will be driving the number 66 for Garage 66 in this weekend's Coca-Cola 600. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first or second start for Josh Bicki in the NASCAR Cup Series this year. Josh Bicki's made a lot of starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, for majority of them for DGM Racing, where he's had some decent runs with that program this year. He's actually gotten a couple top 15s and has also almost gotten top 10s, and I think he has shown some really good speed there. This is a decent opportunity, but I will say when it comes to Garage 66, their program is not one of the fastest organizations out there. They've had drivers like Casey Mears this year. Of course, they almost had Mike Wallace drive the car, but of course, Mike Wallace did not enter the event. They was not approved, so they put Chandler Smith in that car. It's good to see the Garage 66 is showing up, but again, I don't expect any speed. I do think more than likely that is going to be the slowest car on the racetrack, even slower than the NY Racing Machine. So I don't really think that Josh is going to have any sort of speed to be a major factor and contender. Nonetheless, this is a really great opportunity for Josh Bicki. I hope he can run really fast and hope he can have a really strong and great run with MBM or Garage 66 this weekend at the Coca-Cola 600. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Derk Cross. As it was confirmed by Joseph Straley from the TobyChristie.com network that Derk Cross will be driving the number 44 for NY Racing this weekend in the Coca-Cola 600. This is going to be the first start that Derk Cross is making any NASCAR National Division in 2025. Last year he drove, I believe, the 02. I think he drove a couple races in the Cup Series last year for Calling Racing. I think he drove a Gateway, I'm pretty sure, in a couple of the races throughout the 2024 season, and in 2023 made a ton of starts for Colleague Racing there. We haven't seen Derk Cross really out on the racetrack, and a big reason for that is because Derk Cross does not bring a lot of sponsorship to the table. I think for Derk Cross, this is really a decent opportunity. I will say one thing about NY Racing. They have been showing a little bit of improvement with their speed. They've been qualifying a lot better, and Derk Cross is someone I remember many years ago who was in the Toyota top pipeline and was someone who was a top prospect in NASCAR, but when he didn't do really that good job with McAnally Hogan Racing in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, failed to make the playoffs in 2 years he was at that program, unfortunately kind of fell off the map sadly, which is a shame because like I said, I think Derk Cross is a very talented race car driver, and I think he does have a lot of potential. But the problem is that he just hasn't really, he never got a top-level opportunity because Derk Cross, unlike a lot of other drivers like Hailie Deegan, for example, he did not bring any sponsorship to the table and also doesn't have a massive following on social media, unfortunately. But I really hope for Derek he can run very solidly and run very, very well because, again, I think he is a really talented race car driver, but I don't think Derk Cross will be a factor with this car. It would be impressive if he gets the top 30. I think he's got a chance to do that this weekend. We'll have to kind of wait and see if he can, but I think the speed may be there. We'll have to kind of wait and see, but I hope he can run really well because it'd be nice to see Derk Cross show some really good pace and really strong speed in this year's Coke 600. We'll see what he can do this weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway with NY Racing. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Cars Tour ratings from this past weekend at North Wilkesboro. Now, we've got a lot of ratings to take a look at from this weekend. Let's first talk about the Cars Tour ratings. So, according to Adam Stern, for the Cars Tour race, the Cars Tour averaged 253,000 viewers for Friday night's race on FS1, with a peak of 365,000 viewers. For a first-time event that happened on national television on a Friday night, for example, that is a really, really big deal. I don't know what the Craftsman Truck Series race numbers were for this weekend at North Wilkesboro, but I got to tell you, they're probably really almost close to what the Truck Series has gotten this year, considering some of the races the Truck Series have only had about 500,000 viewers for their events. So to have over 253,000 people tune in, I think that is a really, really big deal. And I think that the Cars Tour, and especially with these numbers coming out, I do think as they put more races on FS1 or the big networks for that matter, I do think more people are going to tune in because I think the Cars Tour generally puts on some really fun and fantastic racing. I think some probably tune out a little bit, of course, because some of the big wrecks that happened. And of course, you had the comments from Josh Berry earlier this week. They got a lot of controversy around them. But I got to say, these numbers for a first-time Cars Tour event, I think they're actually really, really good in all honesty. I know some will disagree, and that's fine and understandable. But I think that to have 253,000 people tune in on average for an event, that is actually a big thumbs up. And again, I do think, especially with the success of the event in the long run, I do think you're going to see more people that are going to clam for it. And I'm absolutely wanting it too. I want to see more Cars Tour races. I want to see more races on national television. A lot of people don't have Flow Racing because while, yes, Flow Racing does provide a very good service, the cost is too high, especially with the economy currently at the moment right now. So I think if they put some more of these races on TV, I think that'd be really awesome. And I think that'd be a really great decision if they went ahead and did that. So we'll see if they add more races on TV going forward. But I think this is a major thumbs up. And I do think this is a major, major win for the Cars Tour, in my opinion. And going forward, can we get Eric Brennan to call NASCAR Cup races on Fox? That'd be really awesome, especially since Mike Joyce probably closing in on the end of his career as being a lead commentator for Fox in the sport. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Indianapolis 500. Now, we've got a couple pretty big Indianapolis 500 stories to talk about today on the channel. The first one revolves around official confirmation that the 2025 Indianapolis 500 has officially sold out for 2025. We've been expecting it since last week. It was announced the blackout was going to be lifted at the racetrack, but now it's officially confirmed that this year's Indy 500 is sold out. I believe this is another year of it happening. I don't remember if last year they sold out. I think they did, if I remember correctly, but I don't exactly remember. I know they've had not a ton of sellouts in recent years, but this is a really big year for the Indy 500, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they are expecting nearly 350,000 people to show up at this year's Indianapolis 500. So this is a really big deal. Of course, there's a lot of storylines around it. You've got a lot of teams like Prema, who, of course, won their first Indy 500 pole this year. You've got Kyle Larson. I think Kyle Larson is bringing a lot of people in because, of course, he's trying to attempt the double. And while the weather doesn't all around look amazing by any stretch of imagination for Indy at the moment, it seems to be getting better as the days go on. But I think nonetheless it's still a really big deal for the Indy 500 to have a complete sellout. I think it's a big win for Indianapolis. I know IndyCar has had some issues in recent years trying to get people to be interested in their events, but I think this is still a really big deal. I think this is absolutely solid, and I got to say this is definitely a really big win. Very happy and glad to see that the 2025 Indianapolis 500 has sold out. I think it's definitely a big win for IndyCar, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Indy 500 qualifying TV ratings. As it was reported by Adam Stern on yesterday that Fox got 924,000 viewers on average for Sunday's Indy 500 qualifying. That is down from 1.145 million from 2024. That is almost a 20 to 25% drop from the 2024 season, and I think I know exactly why the numbers were down from 2024. A big reason is because Kyle Larson did not make the Fast Six. Because I remember correctly last year, there was a lot of cross promotion from NASCAR and IndyCar on this event. And there wasn't as much of that cross promotion this year because NASCAR was really, of course, not happy with Kyle Larson trying to run the Indy 500 this year, or last year, I should say, and they weren't happy about him basically promoting the Indy 500 over the Coast 600, unfortunately. But it is interesting that those numbers drop, and again, it's because Kyle Larson wasn't in the Fast Six. I think that is a big reason for that, and of course, you had the All-Star heat races going on at the same time. I remember correctly last year, I think the All-Star heat races were an hour later, so people got the chance and opportunity to watch the final qualifying rounds, and they really didn't miss much compared to this year, where Fox kind of worked against itself and put NASCAR and IndyCar at the same time. I think if we're going to be doing scheduling going forward next year, Indy 500 qualifying needs to happen before the All-Star heat races happen, or in the heat race, the last chance qualifier, or just do the last chance race earlier in the day and then get those guys in later. That would be the simple solution I would see that probably could happen. It's very interesting nonetheless for sure, but I think the ratings are not awful by any stretch of imagination, but they definitely could be better. But I'm not seeing worse, but I definitely think they could be better, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Dillon. As it was announced on Monday that Austin Dillon will be driving a 3-car for Richard Childress Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Austin Dillon will be doing double duty as, of course, he drives full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series, driving the number 3 car for RCR in Cup. This is going to be the first time we have seen the 3-car in NASCAR Xfinity Series competition since, I believe, 2022, when the number 3 was around for a certain driver named Jeffrey Earnhardt, who, of course, drove that car at Talladega Superspeedway, with Larry McReynolds being the crew chief. Now, this is the first time that Austin Dillon has competed in the NASCAR Xfinity Series since 2022 or 2023 when he drove for Caller Racing in the number 10 machine. Of course, Kyle Busch also drove that car in 2023 as well and showed some pretty good speed. Now, Austin Dillon, what are his expectations? Well, we don't really expect much from him when it comes to NASCAR Xfinity competition, Cup competition, but when it comes to Xfinity Series numbers, I honestly think he'll be somewhat of a factor for a very, very good run. I think he will be a contender for a top 10, and I think he's got an outside chance of getting a top 5 as well. But the Xfinity Series field is very competitive this year. You've got the Junior Motorsports cars of Connor Zilisch, Justin Allgaier has been the strongest car this year. Carson Quaffle, Sammy Smith. The Haas Factory Team cars of Sheldon Creed and Sam Mayer. Joe Gibbs showing some pretty good speed with Taylor Gray this year. And I also believe there's a couple other guys running, including Chase Briscoe, who's driving the number 19 machine this weekend. I think there's a lot of really great competition this weekend in Xfinity. So I really hope Austin Dillon can run really well. I think he'll be a major factor, and I think we'll have a strong chance and opportunity to running very, very well this weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. We'll see what he can do this weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway in the Xfinity Series. And the number 3 car, also Boot Barn confirmed as well. They are going to sponsor him in the Mexico race in a couple weeks. And I think that car also does look pretty solid and really, really good, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the AllStar race TV ratings. And honestly, they are not very good. As was reported by Adam Stern yesterday afternoon or morning, that FS1 earned 1.965 million viewers for the AllStar race in 2025 at North Wilkesboro. That is down from 2.513 million in 2024. That is a 25% or 20% drop from 2024. That is a little bit of an unacceptable drop from the event. But again, I mentioned this. There was a lot of cross promotion from the Indy 500 qualifying session that happened. And I think he didn't have that promotion because, of course, Kyle Larson last year stayed in Indianapolis, and a lot of people from Indianapolis were very interested to see how Kyle Larson can do in the event. With Kyle Larson not making the Fast 6 or the Fast 12 this year and making it on Saturday, I think that's a big reason why the drop happened. Also, short track races generally don't bring in the most race ratings. I know we want to see a points race in North Wilkesboro. We're going to talk about that here in just a short little bit. But when it comes to North Wilkesboro is in not as big of a market. Also, I think the All-Star race has definitely lost its luster in recent years. And I think this All-Star race is one of the best All-Star races we have seen in recent years. Don't get me wrong. But at the same token, same time, the All-Star race doesn't have the same luster as it did many, many years ago. So I think that's another big reason to kind of look at why the ratings are unfortunately down this time around for the 2025 All-Star race. I think the numbers are very solid. They're not spectacular by any stretch of the imagination. They're not really good in my opinion, but I do think, especially with them going to Prime, I think you're going to see more numbers for the Coke 600, especially even though it is on a streaming service. I do think because Amazon does have a huge number of people that tune into their stuff, and plus like 180 or 200 million people tune in when it comes to Amazon, have those subscriptions over there in Amazon Prime. I do think, which we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit, I do personally think that we're going to see bigger numbers for those events. I think that the numbers are not that good by any stretch of imagination. They could definitely be worse for sure, but 1.9 million is not the biggest number for the All-Star race, and I think we need to spice up the All-Star race going forward to make it more intriguing, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Amazon Prime. Now, there's been a lot of information revealed in regards to how the Amazon Prime coverage is going to be looking for 2025. And there's some very interesting stuff that was announced on Monday as well. According to Adam Stern, Amazon Prime will be only running double box ads during green flag racing in 2025. This is a major win already for Amazon Prime. There will be no full screen commercials during the green flag running. This is something that a lot of networks have been starting to do in 2025. Fox did a lot of these during the 2025 season on their main Fox broadcast at the Daytona 500. They did this at Circuit Americas, they did it at Atlanta, and they also did it at Talladega Super Speedway. Even though the Talladega coverage was not very good, they did a lot more double box ads. And last year, NBC started doing this as well with their coverage at their super speedway races of Talladega, at Daytona, and Atlanta as well. But to be doing it for all 5 races during green flag action, that is a major step in the right direction. Full screen ads are something that most younger fans like myself really don't want to be seeing at this point. So you need to get away from doing all the full screen ads. If you want to do it during when we are under caution, fine. That is understandable. Do it when we're under caution and do the full screen ads. But don't do it during when the green flag action is happening, because we're missing a lot of action when you are going to a full screen ad. You're missing action on the racetrack and missing very important moments. And if there's something that happens, they need to come back and cut away those commercials like Fox used to do back in the day. So I think this is a major step in the right direction and a massive thumbs up. Another interesting thing that I noticed is there's going to be a new thing called Shop the Race Experience. We're going to be able to, I think, shop for certain products that are going to be there. Overall, there's a lot of really good things at Amazon. They've got a really strong broadcast booth this year with Dale Jr., Steve Attar, Adam Alexander. You've got Carl Edwards, Daniel Trotta, and Corey LaJoie in the pre-race and post-race show. And speaking of which, a 45-minute post-race show. I've been clamoring for more post-race. I don't give as much about pre-race, and I think they're going to have a decently long pre-race show as well. But post-race is something I absolutely clamor for. We need a lot more post-race in NASCAR currently at the moment. So I think that this is a major step up from Amazon, and a lot of these things I absolutely am loving. I think it's going to really help the coverage get a lot better. I think it's going to make it definitely better for sure. And I think this is a major step up and a major win when it comes to coverage for NASCAR. I think there needs to be better coverage, and I think that Amazon is going to bring a lot of very innovative things, and a lot of things I'm hearing are very exciting for the Amazon side of things. I think that what I'm hearing is actually really awesome and really great to see, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about North Wilkesboro. Now, we had a lot of drivers who are absolutely wanting North Wilkesboro to host a points paying day in 2026. One driver that's also a big fan of North Wilkesboro is Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson said at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, I believe it was on Monday, he says it is the best short track in NASCAR currently at the moment, and it puts on the best racing at this particular moment. At this moment, I actually do have to agree with Kyle Larson right now. We saw a very exciting race, and there definitely were dull moments at the AllStar race. There is no denying that. But I think that the racing generally was really, really good and very, very solid. And I think that we saw some just good racing. Yes, it was very difficult to pass, but it was very difficult to pass during the car store race. It was very difficult to pass during the truck series race. And from what I remember, it was very difficult to pass during the modified race as well, unless you wreck somebody like some of the people did during the modified event. But I think that the racing at North Wilkesboro has gotten better over the last couple of years. The Truck Series had put on some good shows the first 2 years, but the Cup Series the first years didn't do great. I think there's not really much you need to do to get North Wilkesboro better either. I think if they can age the bottom of the track a little bit more and the top as well, and the bottom can be a little bit more dominant down the road or become a little more closer, I think the race will be great. Martinsville and Bristol especially are not that good at the moment with the next-gen car. And I think that's one reason why less people are going to those races, unfortunately. I don't know if the night race have as many people this year because of that. I think for North Wilkesboro, I think it's earned the right to have a points-paying race, and I think the racing right now is so good at the track. It's good to see that track back on the schedule. It should have been on the schedule, and I think it's really awesome to see that it's back on the schedule long term. I think that the racing, like I said, is so good at that track right now, and I think that North Wilkesboro absolutely nailed it when it comes to the racing product at this time. So this is a major thumbs up. This is a major, major win. I think the racing is really good. I think the racing is really, really great. And I think it's very solid racing at the track. And again, I am absolutely for having a points paying day at the track. Many drivers want to see it happen. I think it needs to happen. I really hope we do see a points paying race at this track in 2026. I hope NASCAR adds it. Take a day away from Bristol at this point, because at this point, Bristol's not putting on the best product with the next-gen cars. And I don't even think the racing this past time we were there was that great, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joey Logano. Now, Joey Logano had a lot of things to say after the NASCAR All-Star race, and Joey Logano was very mad at Christopher Bell after the All-Star race had concluded. So let's go back to what happened during the 2025 All-Star race. So the two cars that had dominated the event were Christopher Bell and Joey Logano. They were the two strongest cars in the whole entire race. However, Joey Logano and Bell were battling really hard. Logano moved Bell up into the outside wall a little bit. There was a little bit of contact between both of them. And with around 10 laps to go, Christopher Bell would try to pull a little bit of a slide job on Joey Logano, move him up the racetrack a little bit, and Joey would lose the lead. And Bell, who was on fresher tires as well, he was able to get the race lead and started driving off and pulling away from the field. After the race concluded, Joey Logano was very upset with Christopher Bell about what happened and said he would definitely get back to him, and basically said he's going to wreck him, and if he had a chance to get back to him, he was going to wreck him. Now, Joey Logano, after this had happened, a lot of people were really upset. Well, Joey Logano has actually responded to some of these comments and actually has taken back some of the comments that he has said. He basically says about Christopher Bell, he actually went back and watched the replay of what happened, and he said, no, Bell really didn't do anything wrong. And Logano said, yeah, I kind of raced him like an asshole, and I was the one who started it first, and if Bell wanted to make that move, he had every right to do that. And Logano also even admitted something as well, that he is a sore loser. Now, when I've said this before, and I'll say it again, sometimes when you get out of a race car, sometimes we say things that we are going to regret. I've said things in the past that when I say some things, I do regret later. And I think Joey Logano, as much as sometimes Logano will act like that people are in the wrong for certain situations, sometimes you have to take a look at the whole full thing. And I guess what Logano's saying here is he didn't really get a full side of the story before he saw everything. And I think it's good on Logano to actually go back and admit that he's wrong. I know some people don't always like it when people take back the original comments they said, but I think in this case and situation, I think it's really important for Joey Logano to admit that he was wrong here, because I think Logano was a little bit over against Christopher Bell. And when I look at the original incident incident with Bell and Logano, I really couldn't see what Chris or Bell did wrong, in all honesty. Plus, Joey Logano has raced people like that before. And the most important thing to me that I love is the fact that Logano admits he's a little bit selfish and is a sore loser. He is kind of a sore loser. It's very true. And I love when Logano admits that. From what I understand, Joey Logano is a very nice guy off the racetrack. He's someone that many people respect. And Logano is one of the best drivers in NASCAR history. There's no denying that. Yes, you can talk about his championships, but I love this from Logano. And I know I've not always been the biggest fan of Joey Logano at times, but when Logano, I like sometimes when he kind of says what he wants to say. And I also love the fact that, and I gain respect for Logano here, because he admitted he was wrong. That is a big thumbs up for me when people can admit they're wrong in situations. I think Logano and Bell will race each other hard going forward, but I think there's respect between those guys. In all honesty, I do think that there is a huge respect from those guys, and I think that this is something to kind of watch for, is respect between these guys, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about RFK Racing. Now, of course, RFK Racing very recently got handed a really big penalty for Chris Buescher. It was something on the front bumper fascia of the car that they're only allowed 2 inches on the front of the car. That's what NASCAR said on the Holler Talk. And RFK was kind of evaluating if they were going to appeal the penalty. Well, it was announced on Monday that RFK Racing will be appealing the L1 penalty that got handed at Kansas Speedway. Chris Buescher, of course, got handed, I believe, a 40 or 60 point penalty. Of course, the L1, the hardest you can go is from 20 to 60 points, a $50,000 or $75,000 fine, and Scott Graves was suspended for 2 races. Now, I believe that Scott Graves will not be crew chiefing this weekend in the Coca-Cola 600. I believe that Doug Ranoff will be in that car once again crew chiefing. Of course, does have some stuff going on in the truck series currently at the moment with Thor Sport Racing. But Doug Ranoff, of course, also has experience with Brad Keselowski being a crew chief for Brad not many years ago. I'm pretty sure back in like 2017 or 2018. He will be the crew chief for Chris Buescher. Now, when it comes to this, we do not know exactly when the appeal date is going to be. Usually when it comes to stuff like the L1 penalties, sometimes they can be heard this week, and we could get a ruling at some point today. There's certainly a possibility on that. We also could get a ruling on this maybe in the next couple of weeks, because unlike a disqualification penalty where they want to get that done within a week or so, when it comes to these bigger L1 penalties, they can happen weeks and weeks down the road. Now, so far, we have seen a couple of these appealed. I believe it was Chase Briscoe for the Daytona 500 qualifying session. They were handed, I believe, an L2 penalty, and he went to negative points. They appealed it a couple weeks later, and Chase Briscoe shockingly was able to win his appeal, which was a major win. So I am not exactly sure what RFK could be looking at. Now, this is not the first time RFK Racing has appealed the penalty. When Brad Keselowski was handed the first big next-gen penalty after Atlanta in 2022, they appealed that penalty. I can't remember exactly what it was. Something on the spoiler, I'm pretty sure. They appealed it. They lost their appeal, and they weren't amended any of that, and they were still in the negative points for Brad Keselowski at that time. For RFK, and I think the reason they are appealing it is because Chris Buescher is down 27 points. Now, that being said, I still think 27 points, well, that still is a lot of points that he's going to have to make up. I don't think it's insurmountable for him to make that up at this time. And I think there's a really good chance that in the future, he will make up all those points. Because while RFK hasn't had overall the most speed this year, like the Hendrick, the Penske, and Gibbs cars have had, I do think that they are going to have the speed to be pretty big factors for some really good runs. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see what happens in regards to this penalty going forward. But in my opinion, I think it's going to be tough for them to win this. I don't know exactly what can be done for them to win. They'll show the proof. They'll show the evidence. Sometimes NASCAR can have issues when it comes to officiating these things. But if they lose their appeal, they also can amend it and change it. But I don't think anything will change if they lose their appeal. We'll see when the penalty does get announced. I don't know exactly what date the appeal is going to be, but Chris Buescher's team will be appealing the penalty. Some other teams, of course, have tried to appeal for. Ryan Blaney's team appealed disqualification at Vegas. They were able to win their appeal, and other teams have appealed and been able to win. So we'll see what happens in regards to this appeal in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Team Penske. Now, this is a story that I kind of glossed over on this channel during Indy 500 qualifying, but the number 2 and number 12 Team Penske teams were caught for cheating at this year's Indianapolis 500. The second year in a row that Team Penske has had a cheating scandal. So we all go back to St. Pete in 2024 when there was a push-to-pass fiasco that took place, and Joseph Newgarden had lost that race, and Pat O'Ward was given the win. And we got big penalties that were handed to both drivers because of this. Now, originally, they were basically going to be able to start inside the top 12 in the Fast 12 of the event, but we're not going to be going to the rear of the field. Well, that has changed. It was announced on Monday morning that the number 2 and number 12 Team Penske organizations are going to move to the rear for this year's Indianapolis 500. And the strategist for the team, Austin Cindric's father, Tim Cindric, who is, of course, a strategist for Team Penske's number 2 car, and Ron Brzezinski, who is a strategist for Will Power, they will be going to the rear of the field. Now, Scott McLaughlin, who did crash on Sunday before they got an opportunity to go for the Fast 12 and Fast 6, they had checked that car. Apparently, they did not have the rear attenuators on the back of the car, so he will not be going to the rear and will start in 10th position. They also have been handed $100,000 fines, and they will not get any qualifying points from this year's Indianapolis 500. This is now the second year in a row, like I mentioned, that Team Penske has been involved in some sort of scandal when it comes to cheating. And in IndyCar, it's a very rare thing. When it comes to NASCAR, we're kind of used to this at this point when it comes to disqualifications, but they're not as big of a deal. And I think if it was any other team that wasn't named Team Penske, I think it'd be a very big deal. The problem is, it's Team Penske. And its problem is it's because Roger Penske owns the series. It is a massive, massive conflict of interest. I have said this since Roger Penske has come in to be the leader of the team, or the leader of the series, and become the owner of the series. Ever since he took in as owner of the series, we have seen a lot of this conflict of interest come up. And there's been a lot of these people that do bring up a lot of these conflict of interest issues. And I think many people in the industry do believe that Penske's penalty is not fully justified. I think it's a compensated rule, and I think it's at least somewhat of a justified penalty that Team Penske got handed here, but I don't think it's completely fair. I feel for Jacob Abel, and I get the fastest 33 should be in the Indy 500, and technically they were in the fastest 33. But there is a non-cheated car that is not in this year's Indy 500 with Jacob Abel. And meanwhile, you've got 2 cars that were cheated from the number 2 and number 12 teams. Now, the other thing that's big, their pit stalls have been forfeited, and they have to go to the last 2 pit stalls, which I gotta say, pit road is going to be really important in this year's Indy 500. I think the penalty is somewhat fair, I will say, but I do think both cars probably should not have been allowed in this year's Indy 500. I get you want 33 cars, but I think to make it even harsher and make the people in the industry of IndyCar very happy, I think moving them out of the event would have been the most justified thing at this point. There's a lot of tension. Honda's not very happy. They've got a car that should have been in the Indy 500 probably, that isn't in the Indy 500 at this point. And I think overall, while the penalty I think is certainly a fair penalty, and I'm glad that Doug Bolskich, I feel for Doug Bolskich because he's got to make a tough decision. The guy, you could tell, is very stressed about it. I don't think Roger wanted to do this. I also want to make this clear. Don't send any hate toward Joseph Newgarden or Will Power. They don't even work on the cars. I feel for those 2 guys because they shouldn't be getting a hate for this situation. It's not their fault what happened here. Send hate to Tim Cindric and anyone else in the Penske group that deserves it. Don't send any hate toward them, but I think the penalty is okay. But I don't think it's a fully justified penalty for Team Penske. And I think it's not the most justified penalty because I think there needs to be more of a bigger message sent going forward, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kurt Busch. Now, we do have a couple Kurt Busch stories to talk about here near the end of the episode. But as many of you have probably been seeing over the course of the last couple weeks, Kurt Busch has been putting a lot of commemorative posts on his NASCAR Cup Series career as, of course, it revolves around the NASCAR Hall of Fame. But one thing that really caught my eye and attention is the fact that he said he has finished his career with 2311 Racing. There, of course, we know that Kurt Busch has been medically cleared to return to NASCAR and has been racing in other forms of racing in the world. Of course, he raced in the big event that happened. He raced in that big championship, the Race of Champions, I believe, in Miami, if I'm not mistaken, competed in that event. And Kurt also has been doing some other stuff in recent years as well. Now, obviously, Kurt Busch has a medically cleared to get back into racing like we've already mentioned, but there's always been that question, could we see Kurt Busch ever come back and race in the sport? Well, it seems like at this particular moment in point that Kurt Busch more than likely will not be returning to NASCAR to get behind the wheel. And I think that is certainly very unfortunate if it's the case. Kurt Busch's career if it is true that his career is over. That is really tragic. Kurt Busch's career was going very well, and I think Kurt Busch, regardless, would have retired in the next couple of years. But obviously, Kurt Busch, I think, still had that competitive fire in him. I mean, in his last season, Kurt Busch was running very solidly. He had a lot of really good speed with 23XI Racing. I think at the time was an outside championship contender at that point, and he, of course, got that win at Kansas Speedway in 2022 in dominating fashion. Had to be Kyle Larson at the end, but he ran very solidly and showed really good speed in the event. And I think it's a shame that if it is true that this is the last time we are going to see Kurt Busch behind the wheel, I think that is a massive, massive shame because Kurt Busch, I think many of us would like to see him back in the sport. Now, he is going to be at Pocono in a couple weeks, which, of course, was where his last time behind the wheel had happened, which I think is going to certainly be interesting for Kurt to go back there. Will he be strong about that? We don't know. But I really would love to see Kurt Busch get the chance and opportunity to come back with 23XI. They've obviously got that fourth car that Corey Heim has ran this year, and there might be other guys who get the chance and opportunity to drive that car at this point. But I definitely would love to have seen Kurt Busch get the chance and opportunity to come back to a team like 23XI and get the opportunity to race once again. But I also understand if this is truly the end for Kurt, and if he accepts that, I'm definitely okay with that because Kurt Busch, like I said, is one of the best drivers to ever grace the sport and race in the sport. So I think it's certainly interesting for sure that, again, this is most likely and more than likely going to be the last time that we probably will see Kurt Busch in the sport race again. Kurt's one of the best ever drivers to race, 34 career NASCAR Cup Series wins, won the Daytona 500 in 2017, won the Coca-Cola 600 in 2010, and just won a lot of big events in his racing career. So like I said, if this is truly the last time we see Kurt Busch in the sport and racing once again, it is going to be unfortunate, and it's for me going to be a little devastating as a fan to see that Kurt Busch didn't really get to send off his career on the right note. But nonetheless, for Kurt, I think for him, if he's settled with that, and if he's okay with that, then I'm okay with that too. It's like me wanting Carl Edwards to come back and race, and other people to come back and race. But obviously, other guys like Carl Edwards, for example, and Greg Biffle and all these people, even though Greg's working with Cleveland Farland very closely at this moment. To me, though, I would love to see Kurt Busch get the chance and opportunity to come back. It sounds like Kurt's not coming back at the moment and racing again with this commemorative post. But nonetheless, congrats to Kurt on an incredible career. And we'll talk about his NASCAR induction here very, very shortly on the channel. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. Now, I did a video covering this on the channel on Monday morning, but it was officially announced on Monday morning that Connor Zilisch has been officially cleared to return to racing this weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway. He put out a statement saying, "Guys, I am back. I will be back behind the wheel this weekend to run the double for this weekend and do my own double this weekend at the racetrack." He is going to be running this weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway, of course, in two different cars. He'll be driving the number 88 car for Junior Motorsports, his full-time job currently at the moment, and he also drives the number 87 car for Trackhouse Racing. Let's go back to what happened. So Connor Zilisch, of course, was battling for the win at Talladega Super Speedway with guys like Jeb Burton, Jesse Love, and Austin Hill, and it looked like he was on the way to picking up his first ever oval victory in NASCAR Xfinity competition. He was on the outside of Jeb Burton, was getting a really big push from Jesse Love. He got back out in front, and Jesse Love tried to make it to the inside of Connor Zilisch. They went down the back straightaway. Connor Zilisch come down a little bit. Jesse tried to make the move. There'd be some contact, and Connor Zilisch would spin really hard into the inside wall. He then complained on the radio that his back was hurting, and they basically threw the caution because of his back hurting really, really bad, and of course, I think which was the right call at the time. Then Connor said after he got out of the infield care center that he felt fine and would be going to the physicians and the doctors to go ahead and make sure his back was okay so he could race at Texas. Well, it was confirmed during Texas week that Connor would not be cleared to race at Texas Motor Speedway, and we saw Kyle Larson drive the number 88 car, which of course he took that car to victory lane after Justin Allgaier got caught up in an incident with Chris Wright, which, let's be real, Chris Wright should probably be not behind the wheel of a race car at this point in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But for Connor, we were wondering if he was going to return at Charlotte. This is going to be a very tumultuous weekend because he is going to be doing 900 miles this weekend at Charlotte. Starting off his normal day job with Junior Motorsports. This is a car where I think the big question, will Connor be very, very good in that car since he's not been in the car the last couple weeks? With having a couple extra weeks to rest the Xfinity Series, not racing the last couple events, I do think Connor Zilisch will definitely be in a decent position to be very, very good with this program. I think Connor Zilisch realistically will be a contender for a really strong run in the number 88 machine. I think that he will be very, very fast. The Junior Motorsports cars have generally been the strongest cars this year. The last mile and a half they ran, which was Texas, of course, that car went to victory lane with Kyle Larson. And while Connor hasn't had the raw speed to win a mile and a half all around, he's at top 5 speed. So I think realistically, if he's not hurting any way, shape, or form, I do think Connor Zilisch will be a factor to go to victory lane and be up there with guys like Justin Allgaier, Carson Quaffle, and I'll even throw out guys like Chase Briscoe and Austin Dillon who are going to be in this event. And also, I believe William Byron is running the event too, so Byron is going to be a big factor for that win because 17 car won last year with Chase Elliott, so I think he'll be a major factor for that win. The other ride he's going to be driving, of course, is the number 87 car for Trackhouse Racing. The 87, of course, he'll make his Oval Cup Series debut. He did make his debut earlier this year at Circuit of the Americas, and he ran very, very well in that event until he got caught up in a crash with Daniel Suarez. This is going to be his first test of skill. Now, the Trackhouse Racing speed on the mile and a half has been okay, but it's not been spectacular by any stretch of imagination. The most important thing for Connor in that 87 Red Bull car is going to be to get experience. That is going to be the most important thing for Connor at this moment, is to get as much experience as possible so he can have a ton of success. Because I think that he is going to have a lot of pressure on him to perform, but I also think if you're Connor, you shouldn't have as much pressure. The goal should be to just go out there and perform on a very high level and do the best you can. If he gets a top 30 in the Coke 600, I think that's a thumbs up. Complete as many laps as possible. Don't get caught up in a crash like he did at the COTA race, and just do very, very well. Show what you can do and show what you got. I think the big question to watch out for is with the back injury. And will the back injury affect his performance? Because we saw drivers like Denny Hamlin, Eric Jones, and Alex Bowman, after their crashes and their back injuries, they didn't show the same competitive speed and pace as they did early in the season. So I think that's going to be the big question, right? Is will the back injury affect Connor Zilisch in a big way? Personally, I don't entirely expect that to affect Connor Zilisch in a major, major way. But I think because Connor's very talented, we all know that there's a lot of talk and conversation right now that Connor Zilisch could be moving up to the NASCAR Cup Series full-time next year with Trackhouse Racing, maybe driving the number 99 car next year or the number 87 car. As we know, Daniel Suarez is in a contract year with Trackhouse Racing at the time I'm recording this. We don't know exactly if Daniel Suarez is going to be returning to Trackhouse Racing next year. We're just going to have to wait and see at this particular moment. Nonetheless, I think it's interesting for sure. I really hope that Connor can do a good job. I think Connor will be really good the rest of the year. He's got some good tracks coming up here really soon, which I think is generally really, really exciting overall. But I think for Connor, the most important thing to see is if he can perform very, very well, show some really strong speed and really good pace for the remainder of 2025. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens, see if he can do a really good job. But I'm just nonetheless very excited to see that Connor Zilisch is back this weekend, clear to be returning to racing. Hope he can be very fast, be strong, and show some really good speed this weekend at Charlotte and prove that he can be a contender. Imagine him coming back from injury and winning. That'd be a pretty awesome thing if he could come back and win a race only a couple weeks after missing a race. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about the NASCAR Hall of Fame class from 2026. As the NASCAR Hall of Fame class has been officially announced and confirmed on who will be getting inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. So, of course, on the modern day ballot, you had 10 people that were eligible for the Hall of Fame. You had Kurt Busch, Harry Gant, Tim Brewer, Neil Bonnet, Greg Biffle, I believe Brandy Dorton was part of that group, and a couple other big names are part of that. For the Pioneer ballot, you had Bob Wellborn, you had Ray Hendrick, and a couple other big names as well. And then for the Landmark Award, you had 4 or 5 people that were eligible for that. Let's first talk about who got the Landmark Award. Well, it was confirmed that Humphrey Wheeler has been awarded with the Landmark Award for this year's NASCAR Hall of Fame. Humphrey Wheeler, of course, is maybe, in my opinion, the best promoter in NASCAR history. He, of course, owns Charlotte Motor Speedway, worked with the Firestone Company for many, many years, then took over at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and the guy just would bring so much to Charlotte Motor Speedway. A lot of those crazy and chaotic things you would see every year at Charlotte Motor Speedway and the sunset would happen at that track, Humphrey Wheeler was the man behind that. And the promotion around that stuff was just absolutely amazing. It was behind a lot of really important things in the sport when it comes to promoting NASCAR. And I think for Humphrey, he absolutely earned this right. I think the other people deserve a chance at getting that award, but I think when it comes to who deserves the Landmark Award, I think 100% you got to look at Humphrey. He is the most logical person to get this award this year. I think that's a massive, major thumbs up in my opinion. Congrats to him on getting the Landmark Award. Let's move on to the Pioneer ballot. So only one person gets in from the Pioneer ballot, and that individual is Ray Hendrick. For those who do not know who Ray Hendrick is someone who never really competed in the top 3 divisions, the Cup Series, the Truck Series, or the Xfinity Series. But when you look at his lower series numbers, he is in the top 50 NASCAR greatest drivers of all time, also part of the top 75 as well. He also won 700 races combined in modifieds and late models as well. He is the winningest driver in any of NASCAR's divisions, whether it's modifieds, Cup, Xfinity trucks, all the good stuff. He is the winningest driver in NASCAR divisions ever. And to have 700 wins, that is absolutely incredible. No drivers ever reached that number at this point in any of NASCAR's divisions. And Ray Hendrick was a legend and just won, I think he won 21 races at Martinsville. Like Richard Petty got like 15 wins at Martinsville, right? He won 21 races at Martinsville alone. Best driver ever at Martinsville when it comes to anything. I think Ray Hendrick absolutely earned this. I think it's amazing that he is getting in. I think it's a big deal. I think a lot of other people, I think Jake Elder, Banjo Matthews would have been good choices, but I think for this year, Ray Hendrick getting in makes the most sense, and I think that's a massive thumbs up for the Hall of Fame, in my honest opinion. And now moving on to the modern day ballot. So this one was very difficult, but the most obvious one that got inducted in the NASCAR Hall of Fame, Kurt Busch is the first one from the modern day ballot. Kurt Busch, absolutely no-brainer. The only NASCAR Cup Series champion on the list that wasn't a crew chief, I should say. Kurt Busch, 34 career NASCAR Cup Series victories. He, of course, won the Daytona 500 2017, won the Cup Series championship in 2004, also won the Coca-Cola 600 2010, had 161 top 5s and 339 top 10s, and won with a lot of different organizations. Chip Ganassi Racing, Roush, Penske, 2311, almost won with Furniture Row, almost won with Phoenix Racing 13 years ago. Kurt Busch is someone who absolutely would help a lot of teams grow. And Steve Lauletta, I think, said it best yesterday. He said we would not be the same organization we are right now and the same competitive organization if Kurt Busch was not still part of our team. Kurt Busch obviously has had some off-track stuff that has happened in recent years that unfortunately has affected it. But Kurt Busch absolutely has earned the right to be into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. I think he is one of the best drivers ever, and in my opinion, maybe the most underrated driver in NASCAR history. The guy won a lot. I know he's not as successful as his brother Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch also congratulated Kurt in getting in, which I got to say Kyle Busch is probably going to be inducted in the NASCAR Hall of Fame when he retires in the next 10 to 15 years. He'll probably be inducted around 2040 or something like that. But I think for Kurt Busch, he is one of the best ever to do it. He's one of the best to ever grace this sport, and he absolutely deserves to be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. The last one that got inducted in the NASCAR Hall of Fame is Harry Gant. Harry Gant, 18 career NASCAR Cup Series victories, 2 Southern 500 wins, and one of the most popular drivers, and nearly won the championship in 1984, where he finished in second. Also went on an incredible tear in 1991, where he became known as Mr. September, where he won 4 straight races and nearly had 5 wins in a row when he almost won at North Wilkesboro, dominated that race, was on the way to pick up that win, but had issues near the end, and Dale Earnhardt came up and took the victory in 1991. Harry Gant, Mr. September, will be able to be there to be presented into the NASCAR Hall of Fame, and Harry Gant absolutely has earned the right to get in. I think it'd been cool if Greg Biffle got in, but I really don't have any qualms and issues with this year's NASCAR Hall of Fame class. It is a really strong class for this year. Kurt Busch, Harry Gant, I think are well-deserving to be in there, and I think for the other individual, Ray Hendrick, well-deserved to get into the NASCAR Hall of Fame as well. Now, down the road, I would definitely love to see some crew chiefs get into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. I would love to see Tim Brewer get in at some point. Tim Brewer was part of Junior Johnson's team for many, many years, had a lot of success. And then I think about, other people, like a Banjo Matthews, Car Builder, Jake Elder, one of the best crew chiefs of all time, Suitcase Jake. I would love to see a lot of those people get in down the road. And even love to see Randy Dorton, who built the engines for the team, get in. I'd love to see some of these crew chiefs get in down the road. Because next year, you're going to have people like Kevin Harvick that are going to be eligible. Then in 2027, you're going to have Mark Truex Jr. eligible. I just hope in the near future, we can start putting less of the drivers in, for example, and more of the crew chiefs have a category for that at this point. Have a driver category, and then of course have a crew chief and engine builder category. Or maybe expand the number of people getting from maybe to 3 people from the modern day ballot, and then get 2 people from the Pioneer ballot, so we can start getting more of these people in, because most of the legends of the sport are getting in at this point. But because you're going to have people in the future like Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, probably Christopher Bell, probably Ryan Blaney at this point. Maybe even Bubba Wallace gets in at some point, who knows? But I think overall it is a very solid class for this year's NASCAR Hall of Fame. I think it's a strong class. I think there's a lot of really good people getting in. Denny Hamlin's going to get in the future as well. And some other big names like Brad Keselowski, Joe Logano are going to be NASCAR Hall of Famers with their championships. We'll see what happens down the road, and we'll see who gets in the next couple of years. But nonetheless, congratulations to all the names who joined the list of drivers like Tony Stewart, Mark Martin, Dale Jr., Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon, Richard Petty, Bobby Allison, Dale Earnhardt, David Pearson, all the legends of the sport. Congrats to the names that have got inducted into the 2025 NASCAR Hall of Fame. Or 26, I should say. So, that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What's your thoughts on the class of 2026? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Connor Zilisch returning this weekend at Charlotte? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tonight on the channel, you're going to see the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race picks from Charlotte Motor Speedway. Tomorrow on the channel, you're going to be seeing the Cup race picks from Charlotte for the Coke 600, the Xfinity Series race picks from Charlotte, and the Penske video for the Coke 600 as well. And then, of course, on Friday, we're going to have a NASCAR news video discussing news over the course of the last couple days. And we're also going to have probably the Truck Series race review as well. Then on Sunday, Saturday, we're going to have the Xfinity Series race review, Coke 600, qualifying reactions, and any other videos as well. And then Sunday, we're going to have the Indy 500 review, the starting line for the Coke 600, and the Coke 600 race review as well. And then on Monday, we should have a NASCAR news video discussing news over the course of the last couple of days. We got content coming on people like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Dodge, Honda, all the good stuff. Cletus Safaro, Matt Benedetto, Frankie Muniz, Junior Motorsports, all the good stuff. Same with Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, all the good stuff we'll be talking about on the channel in the coming days and weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.